Okay, this week we're going to talk about empiricism and how it applies to you as a leader or future leader. Matter of fact, let me do this. There, a little bit better. You can see me a little better there. It's overcast today. Okay, so empiricism. The best way to remember what empiricism or empirical evidence is the two words: prove it. So if someone has it now, be careful about doing this because you probably anger people, but maybe you want to anger them. I don't know. But if someone comes up with an opinion, again, opinions and facts are two different things, as you know. So you can always ask them, what evidence drove you to that conclusion? That question I just asked, that's Socratic. Remember back to week 1 with Socrates? What evidence drove you to that conclusion? You could do that, and that's the polite way, the Socratic way of pulling out of where they got that information for you to determine, and maybe the person in question here to determine what is true and not true. See what I just did there? So we're taking empiricism and bringing it back to week 1 to Socrates and the Socratic method. Or if you're a fan of Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, great movie, they call them. That was the best philosophy joke I can do. Okay. So anyway, getting back to it. So see how I just said, what evidence drove you to that conclusion? Where did you get that information? I'm curious. So you're not blaming them necessarily or that they're wrong, or do you have all the evidence that you need to come to that conclusion? You're just asking, how did you come to that conclusion? Where did you hear about that? That's interesting to gain more insight as to whether you concur. So someone says, I don't know, this is happening out in the world and this is appalling and all this. Well, where'd you get the information? Oh, I got it from XYZ news source. So who exactly said that? What makes you think they're the boss? What kind of influence do they have on the situation? You can be very, very polite about it. Or you can say, says who? I made the mistake years ago. My daughter was in middle school of explaining this to her. I didn't do it in the right way. And I said, well, you can always ask the question, says who? It could be to others, could be to yourself too. Like, really, says who? Why do I have this thought or feeling? Have I really tested it? Do I really know, like, for instance, if this manager is only out for his self-interest. That goes back to cynicism. Remember last week was cynicism? Says who? What evidence do I have to have this conclusion? So again, we're going using the Socratic method to test our thinking, to test others' thinking, to make sure that maybe we're not being overly cynical, right? So empirical evidence is evidence that supports a conclusion. It could be based on research. It could be based on data, sound data, the information that you have, the time that drives a conclusion. As leaders, you're not going to be making decisions a lot of the time based on your gut feeling. A lot of decisions are going to be made based on evidence, data, numbers, what have you, before you go ahead and you come up with a conclusion. So for all of you, if you're presenting an idea or recommendation before, say, a director or a board or managers and all that, they don't want to hear your opinion. They want to hear how the data or the information drives a conclusion. You're making a recommendation. It's not about your opinion. Follow me on this. It's about how the information drives a conclusion. So based on the empirical evidence, meaning data that proves something to be true or true based on the research and evidence that you have at the time, this is my recommendation. If you go before individuals say, my opinion, I think, they're going to be polite, hopefully, and say, well, you need to look a little bit more into this. What information is out there to support this? I need more information before I can make a decision as a leader. Especially, with all the leadership theories, with the democratic leadership theory, especially where Leaders are asking for insight, but they ultimately make the decision. That's the democratic leadership style. Uh, Basically, what you want to do there is have data to drive a conclusion. So, when you write papers, for instance, are you writing about your opinion or are you writing based on the evidence? If it's the evidence, that's a good answer. That's why we're big on supporting your contentions with research, APA references, and all that, because no one cares what our opinions are. As authors and writers, actually, we don't exist in academia. Even if our name's on it, doesn't make a difference. The data itself drives a conclusion. What we do is we analyze the information in a healthy manner to come up with a conclusion. So being an empiricist is very, very, very powerful in the sense that you hold something to not be true until the truth has revealed itself. So, all right, this sounds a little bit boring. It's kind of interesting. So if you have a hypothesis, say a relationship between cause and effect, say, I'll just come up with something. The death penalty deters future murders. Well, you can say, says who? What information is out there that proves that to be true? All right. You're not saying it's untrue or true. You're saying what information? Prove it. There, empirical evidence. So then what you want to do is do some research and assume there is no relationship. It's what they call, ready for this, a null hypothesis. So you're assuming there's no relationship between the death penalty and a decrease in murders throughout the country. Again, just an example. So you assume that there is no relationship until the data proves otherwise. And by the way, there is no relationship in that particular situation, believe it or not. Whatever you support is fine. None of my business. But empirically, there is no data that supports it. It's not my opinion. See what I just did there? It's not how I feel about the death penalty. It's about how the data drives a conclusion. So when it comes to leadership, especially, you want to make data-driven decision-making rather than go on our whim or what we think. And here's another problem, too. Say I go ahead and I have a problem in the workplace, and I look back on something I did 10 years ago that worked. Am I sure it'll work in this situation? What other variables might not make how I handled the problem 10 years ago the same here? So we have to question ourselves. Remember the Socratic method and question others as well. And that's the idea behind empirical decision making. Empiricism asks us to prove it or to make data-driven decisions rather than go on our opinion. We have to be careful with our prior experiences too. What's true yesterday might not be true today. You might be spot on with it, but it might not be true in this particular situation. So that's where it comes as leaders or future leaders, or even as employees out in the world there, we should question ourselves as much as we question others. If you're solid in doing this, you're going to be able to make much better decisions. So enjoy this week, and I'll see you on the boards.